Guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to share with you a review on the Take Me on Vacation eyeshadow palette by Kylie Cosmetics. This is the newest eyeshadow palette that just released for the summer collection. So if you guys want to hear my thoughts about this palette and also see swatches, then just keep on watching. So the Take Me on Vacation eyeshadow palette is $52. It is currently out of stock. Of course, it's always getting restocked. It's still available on the site. It just says sold out. So usually that means that it's going to be restocked again. And it's a very different layout from her previous palette. It has 16 shades. It also has a mirror, just like her peach palette. The peach palette was a similar shape, but the peach palette was 12 shadows, and it also is a little bit smaller. The shadows in the peach palette, like, you get more product, but you get 4 more shadows with this palette, so you guys can see like a size comparison. In this palette, each eyeshadow is 0.2 ounces, and then in the peach palette, each shadow was 0.05. So you're actually getting a little bit less product with this palette compared to the peach palette, which it's kind of a ripoff because it is like around the same price point. But you do get 16 shadows with this palette. You get 9 matte and 7 shimmer shades. And you're also getting a dual-ended brush with this palette. This has like a crease fluffy brush and then also like a flat shader brush on the other side. It's actually a pretty good brush. I have been using it every time I've used the palette. And also her previous brush that came with the peach palette was a pretty good brush. So I was happy that it did come with an eyeshadow brush for $52. And then it does also come with a mirror. So I actually do really like the layout. I like that it has 16 colors versus 12 like the previous palette, or 9 like her original 3 palettes. So I was really excited about the layout and the color selection in this palette compared to all the previous palettes. Once I saw that this was going to be released, I knew I wanted it just by the tones of this. I felt like I would use it a lot more compared to her other palettes that were very like specific for like certain looks or occasions. With a peach palette, you basically get just peachy looks. Her other palettes, you get a bronze look, a cranberry look, or the holiday palette were really cool tones. With this, I felt like it was a little bit more wearable for day-to-day and more universal. So out of the 3 palettes that I have from Kylie Cosmetics, this one, the peach palette, and the holiday palette, this one is definitely my favorite just by the colors alone. It's a lot more neutral, it's a lot more wearable for day-to-day, and that's definitely what I wanted with this palette, so it met that expectation. The actual colors, some of them, once you see them in person, you realize it is a little bit random. Like, you get this light lavender shade, and there's just some random kind of purple tones and yellow tones that don't make a lot of sense to me compared to all of the warmer tones and like just neutral colors. With this lavender color and the yellow shade, I feel like those are very much outliers in this whole palette because I don't see a lot of other colors that would complement those shades to make complete looks. At least for me personally, I know a lot of people can probably come up with something creative, but I feel like I would really have to go out of my way to include those shades into looks. But everything else, I was really happy with the colors. So getting into the formula, which of course is always really hit or miss with Kylie Cosmetics, and I guess Kylie said that this was her favorite palette yet, this was the best formula yet. And I've also heard people say that she mentioned you should wet your brush to make sure the colors get really pigmented, which I actually find it really weird that she would point out about her own product. I just find that very strange. I don't follow her anywhere, I just hear things from other reviews, and I found that really kind of weird that she would kind of call out her own products for not being very pigmented. And I just feel like that's kind of a cop-out, like making wearable shades that you could build up by using Fix Plus or using water or something. Like, I just feel like that just is weird to me. But she is right, you do need to wet a lot of the shades to make them really pigmented, or just get them to where you normally would want an eyeshadow to be for the shimmer colors. So the shimmer colors are like really hit or miss, and the matte shades are actually really nice. They're really pigmented and blendable on the eyes. A lot of times with my Kylie palettes, whenever I swatch them on my arm, they look awful, but then once you actually put them on the lid, they're just really quick and easy to blend out. So I'm gonna swatch all the shades, and you guys are probably gonna be pretty disappointed with the swatches, but just know I've used a lot of these shades. I think maybe like all but one. I think all but the yellow shade I played with on my eyes already, and I'll let you guys know which ones actually do work on the eyes and which ones you really have to make work on the eyes, which I don't like to do, but I'll let you guys know how they actually apply as I'm swatching them. So getting into all the shades in the palette, I'm going to start off with this first row, and this first shade is called First Class. It's a matte pastel lavender color, and this is very, very sheer and light, and you guys can see it basically blends out into baby powder. And I'm really disappointed in that because I feel like I wouldn't use this shade unless I could use it on my lid and have like a bronzy or something going on with this shade on my lid and have that be like a bolder look with it. And because it turns into nothing, I can't really do that. So I could use it as a transition shade, but it also doesn't make sense as a transition shade with a lot of different colors. And then this next shade is pretty disappointing as well. And this is the shade called Summer 17. It's a metallic peachy gold. And those are probably the two most disappointing shades in the palette. Out of all the metallic shades, this one is so subtle. And in the pan, it actually feels really hard. Like you really need to dig in with your finger to try to get any kind of pigmentation. You guys can see it's like not super intense or anything. And then this third shade is called Pina Colada. It's a matte true yellow, and this one actually is a bit better. It's very light, so it doesn't look like a lot. It basically blends into my skin, but it's like a yellowy light color. It's a bit better than the purple shade up top. It's a little bit more opaque. It basically looks like nothing when I swatch it because it blends into my skin, but it actually does swatch better than this purple shade. Next we have this shade called Starfish. It's a matte soft papaya. I really like this shade. It's more of a peachy pink tone that's really pretty as a transition shade, and this is the most pigmented color so far. It's really smooth, it's really pigmented, it's really easy to work with. Then the next shade is a shade I was really excited for, and this is called Island Girls. It's a metallic bright teal, and it looks pretty when I swatch it, and then you guys will see it will sheer out, so you can actually make it work. But it does have a little bit of a chunkier glitter to it. It's not like a lot of fallout or anything, but it's not super smooth either. So it's kind of like in the middle, and that's a shade that I was really excited for in the palette. It's a really pretty summer shade. I'm definitely going to do an eye look with this that I've been thinking of that I'll probably post like a whole tutorial of. To blend it out, it does fade a lot, but it is a buildable shade. And then the next shade is another disappointing metallic shade. It's not awful, but there are some other shimmer shades in here that you guys will see are better. This is called Sail Away, and this is a metallic deep gold. This is what's all over my lid today, so it's definitely not awful. It looks actually really nice on my lid, but I did have to go in with quite a bit of Fix Plus to pack it on to my eyes. And once I did, like, it looks really good and it doesn't have any fallout. It stays in place. It does not crease or anything, but you do have to make it work a lot. So I do really like this shade with Fix Plus. I love how it looks on my eyes right now. It doesn't crease. It just looks super pigmented when I do pack on some Fix Plus onto it. But you guys can see, like, compared to no Fix Plus, how sheer it looks compared to how it is on my eyes today. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. But the good thing is that it's not chunky, so you can actually build it up and it's still gonna look smooth. It's not gonna look all like weird and glittery. It actually does end up looking smooth when you apply Fix Plus. And then the next shade is called Aloha. This is a matte pastel peach. This would be like a good transition shade if you have more of a fair skin tone. I feel like in general this palette would work a lot better for lighter skin tones, like any lighter than I am. I feel like you can get a lot more pigmentation out of these shadows and you might like them a lot better because there's a lot of pastel shades in it. So this would be definitely a good transition shade for a lot of more pale skin tones. But for me, it basically blends into the color of my eyelid, so I can't really use it as a transition shade because it's so subtle on my skin tone. And then I do love this last shade in this row. It's called Palm Tree. It's a matte deep brown. This is really pigmented. I use this in my outer V today. It works great. It blends great. It's super creamy. It feels high end. So I really like that shade. It looks really subtle swatched, but every time that I've used it, it works really, really nicely. So moving into the second row, the first shade we have is called Sea Breeze. It's a soft matte sand color. This is another shade that's super light. It's super like pastel. On my skin tone, it barely shows up. if you guys can even see it, basically it blends into my skin tone. It's almost like a setting powder for me. I used it as a transition shade today, and it basically didn't show up because it blends into my skin tone. So that is another color that is better for fair skin tones, because otherwise it's really not going to show up. Next we have the shade Coconut, and this is a matte warm taupe. This color is better as well. I really like kind of more cool tone or neutral brown shades. It's a very soft color, but it is really pigmented. Then next we have this shade Paradise. This is a metallic copper gold. This is one of the better metallic shades. That is something that is actually really pigmented. It's going to show up on anybody. It's very creamy and blendable. So that is probably the best metallic shade that we've swatched so far. And the next shade is called On the Rocks. This is a matte gray lavender. This is another shade that's a little random in the palette, like the purple tone with all of the warmer tones is a little bit random, but this matte color actually swatches pretty nicely. So you have some variation there. Actually, these two might actually look kind of cool together. And then this next shade is called Sunset. This is probably my favorite shade in the palette. It's probably the most pigmented shade in the palette. It's a satin red copper. It's a really pretty color. It's actually really pigmented and really smooth and creamy. And then I actually also love this shade called Spray Tan. It's a matte mid-tone brown color. And this is the color that is in my crease today as well. It doesn't swatch beautifully, but on the lid it goes on really easily, and it actually is really pigmented. That's basically the main color in my crease right now. So next we have Luxury, and this is a metallic ruby bronze color. It's basically like a eggplant shade that has a satin shift to it. It looks pretty bronze on camera, but it is more of a purple shade. And then lastly, Surfboard is a metallic sea green. This is on my lower lash line today. And the only thing I don't like is that it does have some chunkier shimmers to it. So it does swatch nicely, but it does have some fallout to it. And especially when I applied it on my lower lash line, a lot of the shimmers were falling out. So these are all 16 shades from the palette swatched. You guys can see they're very light colors, they're very summery, and they're very pastel. And the biggest issue for me is probably that they're not going to show up if you have a medium or deeper skin tone. They're definitely better shades if you have more of a light complexion or fair complexion. Even my complexion, like light medium, some of them you're not going to be able to use because they're basically going to dissolve into your skin tone. You guys can see with some of these lighter shades, they basically just like blend into my skin. So that's definitely a huge miss with the palette. Some of the shades in the palette are still duds, but a lot of them, once you apply them on the eyes, they actually look so much better than arm swatches. So definitely keep that in mind, because I've always found that to be the case with my Kylie Cosmetics palettes. And every time that I swatch them, I'm like really disappointed. But once I actually apply them onto my eyes, they look just like any other high-end shadows. So overall, the biggest downside with the palette is that some of the shades you really need to build up, which shouldn't be the case with something that's $52. And I use Fix Plus every single day with no matter what eyeshadow I'm putting on my lid. Even if it's already super pigmented, I still use Fix Plus because I want it to look really foiled and metallic. So I always like to use Fix Plus to enhance my shadows, but I don't want to use Fix Plus just to make them look normal, basically, and that's what you need to do with some of the shimmer shades. Some of them are perfect. So the ones on the bottom row work so much nicer, but these two lighter tones you really do need to build up with Fix Plus, or really dig your brush into the shadow to try to get that pigmentation to come out. And this blue shade is a little chunkier. The green one actually does work better, but this blue shade does have a bit of fallout to it. I would actually say that all the matte shades work really nicely on the eyes. I just don't like that the lavender shade is so light that it basically doesn't show up on my skin tone. But the rest of the mattes, they actually work really nicely. They blend out super nice. So really you have just a couple misses, but it's a $52 palette, so I don't want any misses, especially when you get like the Modern Renaissance palette or other palettes around that price range that are just amazing, amazing quality. So it's kind of like in the middle. It's not an amazing palette, but it's definitely not a flop either. I actually do see myself using this palette a lot this summer because I do like the shades in here. I think there's some fun colors in here as well. And I'll especially be gravitating towards these bottom shimmers that are already really, really pigmented. So it just depends whether or not you like the shades in this palette. And I do think that it's going to work a lot better if you do have a lighter complexion, because there's a lot of pastel colors, a lot of really light tones that would show up better on more fair skin tones. So overall, those are my thoughts on the palette. There's some hits, there's some misses. Is it worth the $52? I don't think so, because there's definitely palettes of that price range that are like solid 100% good, like the Modern Renaissance palette. So definitely let me know your thoughts about this palette. I do think that this palette will still be restocked, and I actually did pick up some additional palettes. I have 2 more of these palettes that I'm going to be giving away really soon. One will be in a 12K giveaway coming up in a few weeks, and one will be in a later giveaway probably at the end of the summer. So if you guys are interested in the palette itself, there's going to be some giveaway opportunities if you guys are interested in winning it in the future. Alright guys, so that's everything for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this review of the Take Me On Vacation eyeshadow palette. Definitely let me know if you picked up anything from the summer collection in the comments down below, or if you plan on picking anything up, definitely let me know as well. And if you guys like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I'll talk to you guys soon in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.